As long
Nice.
as you've served 1 day in the military, you're eligible to use our services.
Highlighting your retirement journey and sharing your transition story. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Retire.Army, where we interview people for transitioning journeys from retirement or transition out of the military, and also dig into some interesting topics about transition and retirement. Specifically, today we are with a gentleman from Hire Heroes USA, Mr. Romain Bird, and we're going to be digging into a few things today about finding yourself, about resume building, and about interviewing for jobs. So let's just jump right into it. And I'll actually start out and let you give an introduction of yourself, Romain, and what you do for Hire Heroes USA.
I appreciate it, John. Yep. Good afternoon. My name is Romain Bird. I am a 23 time of service veteran, United States Army. Initially came in as a mechanic and then kind of transitioned over to career counseling as well as recruiting. Um, been with the company now, Hire Heroes USA, for about 5.5 years. And my role, I have a few roles. Um, my main role is basically to help veterans, military spouses transition from their current state into the job market. My other role is basically traveling the state of Georgia, uh, having veterans or informing veterans of our program who have no idea who we are, what we do, and just kind of get them to sign up for the program, as well as meeting new community partners and new organizations to kind of partner with our company. So
Yeah, we're really happy to have you aboard. We've actually been trying to set this up for a while, so it's been a long time in the making, but we're glad to have you here.
thank
And
you.
so let's just dig right into it. And the first topic, of course, finding yourself. And I think it's a great place to start because it's the age-old adage of knowing yourself is the way to success, or one of the stairs to success. So let's talk about finding yourself, why this is a big topic for you, and what does finding yourself actually mean?
Good. Okay. So I honestly think that is the most important thing that a veteran or transitioning service member can do prior to leaving the military. So long that you spend so many years, whether you decide to, do one term or make it a career. Uh, we all know once you once you step one foot in basic training or that job training in the military, things change, right? You lose who you are. You lose that person as Romaine, and now you're Private Bird. And then you continue to progress into you know, your your years in, and then you become Sergeant First Class Bird. And 20 years has passed, and now you have that identity of being Sergeant First Class Bird. You're saying the word chow, and you're saying latrine, and at some point that stops, right? You have to transition back to Romaine. I found that that transition is really complicated and tough for a lot of us. For me, and I tell the story all the time. My very first job interview, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm applying for a recruiting position at a college, and I got my hands on my I'm sitting, pretty straight up. I got my hands on my, my knees, and I'm sounding off with the answer, and I'm giving that weird military stare. I don't know the answer at this time, but I'll get back at the earliest convenience. And I was 100% qualified for the position, and I didn't get it. I mean, the way they looked at me, I thought someone was going to call the police. Like this guy's weird, and that was a learning experience for me. So, um, finding yourself is super important. You have to drop that title and that persona of who you were for the past 20 years and get back to what this corporate America is wanting now. You're no longer Sergeant First Class Bird. You're no longer Colonel Johnson. You're John and you're Romaine. I feel that it's important because that hinders you. That's that roadblock that is in the way that hindering you from being successful in your next venture in life. It is tough. It is very tough. But the world that we live in now, hey, be 15 minutes prior. Let's really be stern. Let's really kind of, be direct with everything. That world no longer exists for us now. So, um, finding that transition or making that transition to become who you should be, that secondary or that initial person you were, um, it is really important when it comes to number one, finding peace, but two, finding a job. So,
Oh yeah, it is tough to make that transition, um, and I've noticed it within myself. I just retired EAS like a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago, and in my head, I'm still calling to do my move, schedule my moves, and I'm still it's hard to get away from answering the phone and saying, "Hey, look, this is Chief Warrant Officer so and so." I'm like, "Okay, well,
Absolutely.
this is Victor now, right? Retired
Yeah.
Chief Warrant Officer." So it doesn't have, you want to hold on to that, but then I also understand in my head, like, I got to fully make that next step, or take that next step and make that transition, grab hold of that transition, right? Because even
Absolutely.
even walking with my wife, and she's like, you can totally tell you're still, you're a Marine or you've been in the military, because I just have that walk, right? Like,
Absolutely.
I've done drill many a time, so I'm like, okay, well, I understand how I should walk 30-inch step, this and that. And it's hard to get
Yeah.
away from that stuff because it's ingrained in your mind for 20 plus years. But
Absolutely.
yeah, that's yeah, it's hard to make that transition. And just like when you mentioned the interview piece, my first interview was like, I was the same way. It was a Zoom interview, but I felt the same way. Left hand, left knee, right knee, and
Hmm.
I'm sitting there staring and giving these robotic, almost robotic answers. And
Absolutely.
it felt strange. I was like, okay, well, I need to let my personality come out a little bit, because I'm kind of easygoing Vic, but when it came to like Chief Warrant Officer Delafleur, I was more
Absolutely.
strict, to the point, by the book, this and that. I need to let my personality, and I think that's a big thing with the civilian companies, is they want to see, do you mesh well with our community, with our group, with our
Absolutely.
organization? And you can't go in there looking like a cyborg, you know, answering questions
Yeah.
like you're still in the military talking to a private. I think that's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I caught it when you did the hand stare too. That's
It's hard to let that go, right? Like, yeah, clean your room, do this. Yeah, it's hard to let that go.
Knife hands ablaze. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it is. It's tough to let go of that, and I think it's that, like, that scanning your sector kind of mentality when
Absolutely.
Oh
you're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
to superiors, or people you're trying to even. I mean, we get that from doing so many boards and so many things in the military. I want to ask you, if somebody is trying to find themselves, and I'll kind of frame this question with a little bit of a backstory. So it took me a very hard left turn in life to be able to start down that path of finding myself. And it was really an abrupt kind of thing that happened. Like, my father passed away. And in that moment, as I was going through that process, like, everything just started to come into my brain of, like, what am I doing with my life? What's going on? My dad was 61 when he passed away, which is
Oh wow.
quite young. And I just had to take a step back, a big step back. And in that process of taking a step back, like, a whole lot of things in my life got realigned in that process over the next 10, 12, let's call it 12 years. But for somebody who may or may not have that kind of jarring moment in their life to be able to take a step back and reevaluate things, where do you think somebody would actually be able to start? And I mean, start as soon as possible, of course, but, like, where would be a starting point to kind of figure that out? Because I truly think this is super important to not only to the community that we're talking to, but just people in general. Like, you go through life and it's almost the same way you go through the military. It's very robotic. It's very, structured, and you almost kind of just, like, coast through life with your blinders on, because you see what's within your 50-meter target, and you're not actually
Mhm.
looking further down range. But where do you think a good starting point for someone would be to start to find themselves?
Great question. I do think that that start has to come from within first. Like, you got to want to make that transition. That is the first place. What worked for me is I started planning my departure from the military about 3.5 to 4 years before my actual retirement date. Um, I was a recruiter, which allowed me to move among the civilian people, right? So I asked to be reassigned to the middle of Athens, Georgia. There's no military bases around Athens, Georgia, right? Because I wanted to just get away from everything military related. Um, I had to drop the lingo. I had to kind of, get with a population of people that I knew nothing about the military, which would allow me to start talking like a normal person and doing normal people things. So it starts there. There are community chats. There's groups. Finding organizations like our organization, Hire Heroes USA, um, that will help you with that process. Mentoring. articles you can read, YouTube videos, anything that you think that is not military related. I suggest taking a liking to. Again, for me, my thing was I wanted to make that transition. My thing was I did not want to be in an area where everybody knew me as Sergeant Bird because I recruited there for like 12 or 13 years. So I couldn't go anywhere without somebody saying, hey, there's that recruiter. I didn't want any part of that. So again, I actually be moved just so I can make that transition where nobody really knew me. And yeah, so it starts there first. Again, you have to be open to transitioning. You have to be open to making that change. And like I said, with our organization, we're going to kind of force that on you. If you answer the phone as Colonel Johnson, I'm calling you John, and we were just going to kind of reinforce that on you to where you pick that up as a habit and coach you through that process. And it's a difficult process. I feel that if we don't make that transition, we're always stuck with that persona that, hey, we're here, you owe me this because I serve my country. And I did read an article once that stated, short statement that, hey, thank you for your service, but now, nobody owes you anything. Let's get to it. Because we volunteered for an all volunteer military force. Now let's get back to the basics of actually finding employment. So yeah, and that was an enlightening moment for me as well, because, as a recruiter, I always told my people, hey, everybody's going to want you when you get out of the military. So as a private, you're groomed. Everybody's going to want me because I'm a soldier. I'm a service member. And that's just not the case in the civilian world. So finding that new identity, that new persona, and actually allowing it to work for you is really going to help you with your transition.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's just, it has to come from yourself, right? So a lot of folks that I've been talking to, from all walks of life, all years, from 4 years to 20 years, a lot of them find it a little bit difficult to make that transition, right? And I believe, and my feedback to them is, look, man, you have to want it. At this point, the military is structured in a way where everything is kind of set up for you. There's an SOP for this. There's an order for everything you do. You walk, talk, etc. Right? Now you need to. You're almost on your own now. You need to figure things out. And if you don't have that look ahead, that desire to improve yourself, to look at your resume and change it or tailor it to every single job that you're doing, or to transition to even the way you dress, stop looking like you're going to deploy to Afghanistan as a civilian and, wearing those 5'11", whatever pants and boots, and actually know how to dress, business casual. You need to make that complete transition and embrace that. A lot of these folks it's tough for them. And, I sympathize with that because it was tough for me as well. I did go to like TRS classes, and I was like, man, business casual. I have not had to. I got a couple of shirts and suits and stuff, but I'm like, that's going to serve me for like 2 days. I got to go out and buy some stuff, maybe some shoes or something. I have to acquire these things or purchase these things. But that's all part of doing that, and you can't do that unless you actually want to. I've come across folks who, it just a short backstory. I went to it was a sergeant's course graduation. And one of the course coordinators there, one of the deputy directors of the schoolhouse, he got up to give a few words. Retired sergeant major from 30 years or so, and it was hard to make out what this guy was saying because every other word was freaking daggone this, daggone that, and I'm like, man, this guy. I don't know about this guy. I don't know if, every sentence including that, even the way you speak, it needs to be transitioned a little bit more,
Absolutely.
My civilian job, I just can't go around throwing F-bombs like I used to, back in Marine Corps, because that'll get you in trouble. So no, I completely agree. The starting point is with yourself, and you have to want to make that transition. If not, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was fixing some technical issues on mine.
No, all good.
But I was definitely paying attention. Yeah, it's a tough transition for sure. And that's why I asked about the starting point as far as figuring it out. For me, again, it was just really just diving down this path of self-discovery of, what was important in my life, what wasn't important in my life, from the lens of, if I die tomorrow, if I should not make it for the next 12 months, what do I need to get in order? It's almost like a pre-deployment checklist kind of thing, right? It's like, is your family okay? Or your finances okay? Or your kids taken care of? Like all these different things. And it seems a bit extreme, but at the end of the day, like having that mental checklist in the back of your mind, kind of, it's been my guiding arrow, my North Star as I dove down that path of self-discovery. Just keeping that in the back of my mind and remembering like what's actually important, what's not important, and really taking it back to basics. So,
Now,
yeah.
I do have a quick question, Romaine. So we understand the starting point for the military members that are transitioning to civilian life. Any insight on, say, like military spouses on their side, their perspective, when their significant other, whether they be male, female, or otherwise, when they're going to transition, any insight or maybe tips or anything for military spouses on maybe their starting point?
So being a military spouse is, I've always heard that being a military spouse is one of the toughest jobs in the military. And I always,
Mhm.
as a private, I'm thinking like, what do they do? Like I'm the one deploying, right? Uh,
Yeah, no,
I've been married
I've heard
now
it
almost
too. Yeah.
27 years. Yeah. So, and that's one thing as I sit now currently in this role in the organization that actually help military spouses, I see now there's a different side of it, right? Um,
There is.
being a military spouse is really, really hard, especially when you marry at a young age. I got married at like 19.
Mhm.
So my wife traveled everywhere I went, right? Um, she was going to school online. So, everywhere I stationed, she would pick up some college classes, but it really took her a long time to actually find, what she, really wanted to do as well as get the education to do it. So with being a military spouse, if you're traveling with your husband, you don't really get to set up any ground rules. You're living under his persona, his identification. So now when that transition comes, who are you? What are you doing? Um,
Right.
there are organizations like Hire Heroes USA. We have a military spouses team. That team
Mhm.
is ran by a military spouse, and everyone that is a part of that team either was a military spouse or worked in some organization that assisted military spouses in their job search. It's a really great team. There are other organizations. I really don't know many because I'm with this company. But there are resources. There's companies that are willing to kind of sit back and give those military spouses what they need to be successful. It is a really hard job as a military spouse. So
Now,
hats off to them
does
guys.
Hire Heroes USA offer the same type of services for military spouses as they do for
Absolutely.
transitioning? Okay, so like
Yep.
resume building, career counseling, interviewing, things like that.
Yep. Resume writing,
Okay.
job coaching, mentorship. With that military spouses team, we actually have virtual career counseling courses or virtual job fairs specifically designed to help those military spouses. Um, you can be a former military spouse as long at some point you were married to someone in the military.
Hmm.
Your services are free with us. So
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, and I do want to give a shout out to Amanda who kind of set all this up, and just to give a kind of an overview of what I've experienced with Hire Heroes USA. It's really been like initially finding Hire Heroes USA, reaching out, getting connected to my counselor, who was Amanda. And then from there, I remember the very first conversation we had. She was like, yeah, like once a month, I'll check in with you. I was like, I really need once a week, because for me, I need to be
Right.
accountable, like really
absolutely.
accountable.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to not have such a big gap in between, because a month is a long time. So she just called me, Thursday as I was driving back to the house. But she calls like religiously on Thursdays. That's our time. And she's always on the phone. And even if I have a few minutes, like she's like, okay, cool. I just want to check in with you. I just want to make sure if there's anything you need, like if I can provide you any resources or anything like that, just keep me informed and let me know what's going on, and I'll let you get back to your day. So
Got it.
yeah, all of that. And it's 100% free. I mean, it's just a no-brainer to have somebody in your back pocket, whether that's through Hire Heroes USA, through ACP, or any of the other organizations out there, like literally having that in your back pocket as kind of your your checkpoint. Like if you want to
Absolutely.
do it every 2 weeks, if you want to do it every month, if you want to do it every 3 months, but having an accountability kind of partner really helps in building the habit of keeping yourself accountable
Absolutely.
in ways that you can't even imagine that happen in the subconscious. So, and as far as that goes, Amanda, our initial conversation was really revolved around resume building and putting together not only a civilian resume, but also a GS resume for the USA jobs. I know specifically you deal because there's a separate branch within the organization that does specifically USA jobs resumes. But let's dive into what a resume is. Are all resumes the same? And yeah, let's just start there.
Okay. So a resume is a brief snapshot of what you've accomplished over a period of time when it comes to the job market. One thing in the military, we were taught you're an army of one. Like everybody worked together as a team to accomplish one mission, right? So in the civilian sector, it's the total opposite. We're competing. It's the survival of the fittest, like mano y mano, right? So there's a thin line, and I use this line a lot. There's a really thin line between being confident and conceited, right? My job or your job is to make you look better than the next person that applying for the same role that you are, right? So you have to make yourself look better. There are different parts of a resume. The one piece I really like to hone in on is that professional summary. An employer or a recruiter is only going to look at that resume between 5 to 7 seconds. So in that 5 to 7 seconds, it's going to determine if they want to continue to read about you and the great work that you've done. So you want to make that is like your movie trailer. Just like if you were watching, something on the TV and, a trailer for a movie comes up, I know if I want to watch that or not within the first, couple of seconds, right? And it's the same thing with your resume. If you make your resume stand out to, hey, I was accountable for this, I did this, I pulled a couple cats out of the tree, like whatever you can do to make your professional summary stand out and make it interesting, it's going to have that reader or make that reader want to continue learning more about you. One thing you don't want to do, one thing you want to stay away from is using all that military jargon and acronym, right? If you take Cindy Sue, who never served in the military, a 23-year-old intern, she has no idea what those words mean. So what you don't understand, you throw in the garbage. And if you're using all these military acronyms and all these statements that nobody has any idea what it is, you're not going to the next stage of the hiring process. If you're using words that are violent, like combat, wartime, weapons, grenades, like that stuff scares people. So again, this culture that we live in, you don't want to use that stuff. So you want to just kind of lighten it up a little bit by using essential military equipment, just something to kind of lighten up that resume. And also too, you want to put it in a format that is going to pass through an applicant tracking system. If there's no civilian term for NCO, private, grenades, like you can't use those words, like those acronyms, you got to stay away from that stuff, to give yourself a fair shot of making it to the next part of that hiring process.
Good. So, quick question on that. So, like I've worked on my professional summary many a time, and I change it every time I go to apply to a different position. Like I tailor it a little bit, to encompass whatever that is, including whatever the job is, including keywords from that job description, whatever they're looking for, right? If they're looking for somebody who's, knowledgeable and agile or whatever it is, I'll include that in the professional summary, because I know that one of those keywords, through the processing, whatever some companies use, like a machine processing that picks up keywords, similar to like federal positions. I know it'll pick up on those things. But aside from that, as far as a professional summary, do you have any tips on the use of keywords? Where to obtain those or how to use those properly? Even the opening sentence of a professional summary. Do you have any insight on that? How to best word that opening sentence?
Yep, absolutely. So with that opening sentence, you always want to list the position that you're applying for or the position that you are qualified in. Like me being a recruiter, I would never put on there that I want to be a brain surgeon. I would always start it off with, operation manager or program manager with, 15 plus years of experience, no more than 20 plus. Even if you've done it longer than that, you don't want to list anything over 20 because then you age yourself. Ageism is a thing, right? So 20 plus years of experience, multiple years of doing ABC, accomplished, any dynamic task, was accountable for a certain amount of money, just anything that's going to get that. Numbers always stand out to people, right? So as many numbers as you can list as far as accountability for personnel, as well as accountability for money or equipment, is going to always stand out to an employer or a recruiter. When coming up with that professional summary, as well as, the key components of your resume, you always want to look at that job description. Before you even touch it, I'd suggest reading that job description a couple of times before you start on that professional summary, because if it doesn't pass through that system, which you were talking about, the applicant tracking system, you're literally just spinning wheels. Those keywords are going to get you to the next part of that hiring process. There's not too many companies that are using people to take resumes and just look fresh out of the gate. They're all going to pass through this applicant tracking system now. And that's the first hurdle that you have to go through to get to an actual human.
And I think a good thing that I did that helped me, at least with this last job I landed, I did, I took Marianne, who was my Hire Heroes USA mentor, who did my resume. It was excellent. Basically, she took 12 years of my fitness reports, like my evaluations, and created the resume for me. She transferred all the acronyms and all that stuff that I had on my fitness reports and made me a civilian resume. A couple of things I needed to change, just, kind of tailor it to the different positions. But she did an excellent job on that. With that, one thing I did was I sent it out to several other people who have already made that transition and are working in the civilian force, like jobs that I would want to get into. Hey, take a look at my resume. Tell me what you think. Give me some honest feedback, man. Absolutely. And they did, and they're like, yeah, you need to change this. It doesn't mesh well with, the civilian life, civilian world, or the position that you're applying for. It's too militaristic. Break it down a little bit more. So I think not only using the good product from Hire Heroes USA, but also using your network to kind of get some feedback on, and it's constructive feedback. Many times I had somebody reach out to me and send me a resume telling me, hey, go easy on me. I'm like, look, be open to that, man. Be open to that constructive criticism. I'm not there to crap on your resume and tell you, oh, this is garbage. Never send me this again. How dare you? No, I'm I honestly want to help this guy out, and I've been there, I've done that, constructed my resume. I want to pass it on to the next person. So definitely not only the Hire Heroes USA, but also utilizing the network is key, I think, with the resume building.
And also too, when talking about networking, I preach LinkedIn so much, right? I love LinkedIn. That is a way to build a really large network in a short amount of time. Oh, yeah. And like you said, having somebody to give you feedback on just your resume, what better way to do it is to connect with a company that you're interested in working for and reaching out to the recruiter and say, hey, this is who I am. I'm interested in working for your company. And I'll throw in something. Hey, I've searched you guys' mission statement and I love the culture of your organization. Do you mind taking a look at my resume just to give me some feedback? You're not asking for a job. You're just asking for that constructive criticism, like you mentioned. And that is a really great way to number one, break the ice, but two, also get your foot or start a conversation with a recruiter or someone in an organization that could potentially help you out with a position. So.
And Romain, if I could, I just want to ask this question for people out there who may have never written a resume, because a lot of folks come into the military really, really early, and especially if we're talking about retirees or people getting ready to retire, they may have gone through life without ever writing a resume, right? Who knows? If somebody was to come to you baseline without any prior resume in their hands, what are some of the key things that you would need for them to be able to deliver to you as a starting point for building a good resume?
Got it. So, your evaluations, like Victor mentioned earlier, if you have your baseline would be your military experience. So we can use anything from your evaluations, your VMET, If you're a lower enlisted that, E3, E4 that really doesn't have any evaluations, then we can use something as simple as your military title, right? If you are a 63 Bravo, which is a light wheel vehicle mechanic, that's not too hard to figure out what you've done. I'm going to do my research, and I'm going to give you, a nice professional summary as well as some 3 to 5 bullets of what you've done. At that point, if you've done anything extra, it is on you to kind of tailor it, update it to the particular position that you're looking for. One great thing about our organization is that for myself, I'm always open to talk to my clients, right? I'm not asking that you wait 21 to 30 days before I call you if you need something. Hey, reach out to me. Even if it's on the weekend, if I'm on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, and if there's a position you're trying to apply for by Monday, reach out to me. What is that? Reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we can make sure I assist you prior to the closing of that job position.
Yeah, I'd say with LinkedIn, it really only works if you make it work, right? So that's
absolutely.
You can have, so a lot of folks don't know, and they preach it in the TRS classes too. You get a year free of LinkedIn. I think it's one time if you're like transition military, right? And use that to your advantage. But I see a lot of folks who it says premium on their account, but they don't have any posts. They, nothing like that. So they're there just kind of like taking the classes, looking at the jobs. I'm like, the one reason you have LinkedIn is to, network. You have to engage in posts. You have to write things about your transition. Let people come and post on your stuff, and you do the same. It's a social network is what it is. And if you don't utilize it, it's not going to work for you.
Absolutely.
And that took me a little while too, right? Like I'm active on Facebook or Meta, or whatever you want to call it, and on Instagram as well, YouTube as well. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, do I really want to get into another social network? But it's a professional network. I saw folks that I knew from the past, and I connected with them, and then it connects you to their connections who may have the same interests or mindset you have. So that's a great way to expand. And there's constantly, like, even if you put, and I found if you put like hiring, #hiring in the search bar, and you tailor it to like within the last week, you can see what jobs are open, or at least what these recruiters are saying. Hey, my company is open for hiring this person in the last week. So I found that out and shared that on Facebook as well. So that's great insight, man. LinkedIn is huge. LinkedIn is huge. If only if you use it, though.
If you use it, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, like, I mean, we talk about LinkedIn. When you go through the TAP process, I believe there's one or two seminars that are talking about LinkedIn, and people mention it sprinkled throughout the TAP process, but nobody ever really dives down into how to use it. And like Victor was saying, like, you have to get engaged. If you have expertise in a certain job field, like literally it's just a matter of sitting down, let's call it once a week or even once a month. Just sit down and write something about something you're actually doing at work in that job that you have expertise on, and write about your experience doing that thing. And that in and of itself is really giving not only your resume, but giving you credibility as a person, and giving you kind of this social credibility with the communities out there that you're connected to, and the broader communities that you're linked through. And it doesn't take a lot, but I'm wondering if Hire Heroes USA has any kind of offering like that, where they sit down and specifically walk you through, like, here's the things you should be looking for on LinkedIn. Here's what you should be doing with your spare time when you're, busy watching Game of Thrones. Instead, jump on LinkedIn for, an hour a week or whatever. Like, is there anything like that, like a comprehensive kind of like crash course on LinkedIn that you guys offer?
Absolutely. So that is something that your transition specialist could assist you with, as well as if you really want to really deep dive into the way LinkedIn works. We can set you up for a mentoring request, and that way we can have someone who's actually has taught LinkedIn, actually worked for LinkedIn, and knows the ins and outs of how LinkedIn works, to sit down with you one-on-one and walk you through that process. Most of us that been with the company for a few years, we know the basics. we can tell you or help you navigate through that process of actually looking for employment by using LinkedIn. Tell you what you should be posting, how you should be posting, how often you should be posting. Post-COVID, the world we live in now, I've noticed that a lot of the job fairs that I'm going to, the career fairs, they're dwindling down. Like there's a lot of in-person stuff that is not happening now. So LinkedIn is one of those tools that allow you to meet a lot of people in a short amount of time to accomplish that one mission, which is finding employment. One person can't, why tackle a job search by yourself when you can build a team and a network of individuals that can help you with that process. So it's a very important tool. Very important tool. I think people should start using.
And as far as that goes, once you get through this process of getting your resume put together, trying to build your network, whether that's on LinkedIn, you can do it on Facebook, you can do it a number of different ways, going to in-person events, surrounding yourself with people in the industry who are doing things like industry days for, cybersecurity or for machine learning or for engineering or whatever happens to be the case. You can just surround yourself in these different communities and get involved with
Absolutely.
these communities. But once you kind of get your resume in front of somebody and they call you back and they're like, hey, we want to do an interview with you. Do you have time next week on Thursday at 2 p.m.? What is kind of the preparation like? Say you've got a week, 7 days to get prepared for an interview, because that's usually what it is, right? It's like they give you a week or two. Generally, it's not too far beyond that for that initial interview. What kind of preparation steps would you recommend for somebody to kind of mentally go through or even write down notes or something like that before they get to the actual interview?
The first thing I suggest is doing your research and actually knowing what you applied for. Someone who's transitioning out, literally, they're just, throwing spaghetti against walls just to see what sticks. So a lot of times we can forget, what is that we've actually applied for. So you want to make sure that you understand what you're applying for and you have that job description in front of you. Use, sites like Glassdoor, Indeed, just to kind of figure out, number one, salary is important. Two, actually what you want to be doing. And three, do you fit with the culture of the organization? Sometimes it's not all about money, right? A lot of times now, post-military, it's not about money for me. It's, the likability of the people I'm going to be working with, as well as the culture of the organization. So those questions would be, where do you see yourself in, where any mobility, upper mobility in the organization? How do you see, what's the culture of the organization? Where do I see myself within 5 to 10 years of working, or 3 to 5 years of working with this organization? And actually understanding what that company does is really going to be like important when it comes to those questions, in an interview.
So I have this question, as you were mentioning that, as we transition from LinkedIn and all that, in your experience, what is the biggest question that folks coming off active duty pose? Is it like how to build a resume? Is it how to connect LinkedIn? How to, interviewing? What is the most that you encounter?
I think it would be how to build a resume.
Okay.
Again, I didn't understand. I knew how to write a counseling statement. I knew how to write evaluations, but I had no idea how to take what I did in the military and actually put it on paper in a way that someone who never served would understand. That was so tough. Even when I attempted to build it and I had the system from the transition center, it was still military heavy. So that is honestly, that's the biggest question, is figuring out how to talk about yourself in a way that most people can understand.
What about we live in 2023. It's the age of technology. What are your thoughts about using like AI for resume building? At least tailoring it.
Absolutely. So what I started suggesting to my guys is that once Hire Heroes USA builds you a really good format of a resume, that is not locked in concrete. Like, we want you to tailor it and adjust it to the position that you're applying for. So the cheat code I've been telling my guys is, look, if you are applying for a position that you qualify for, that you really don't understand how to kind of put it in, in resume bullet format, use something like ChatGPT, copy the job description, upload it, and simply tell it, hey, create resume bullets with quantifiable data with this job description, this job posting. It's gonna give it to you. I mean, at that point, don't copy word for word. Just kind of use it as an idea to kind of, get the wheels to turn to build, to kind of write those bullets yourself.
Right.
But it's a really great tool. Yeah.
Awesome, yeah. Because that is one thing that I've been utilizing as well. I mean, I don't use it word for word because sometimes things kind of sound a little funny, almost robotic, because it is
Absolutely.
robotic. But I use it as from what Hire Heroes USA provided me, the actual base of it, and then tailoring it because I am not the wordsmith that I think I am sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So I could use things like, hey, look, how do I best express that I've led these people to do these things, and then utilize ChatGPT or AI to best express that stuff. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And one thing I'll share with everybody out there too is what I was doing. I knew I was going to retire when I hit about my 15-year mark, and I didn't actually start prepping for anything until like really my 17-year mark. And one thing that I did probably starting at the 15-year mark, because anything before that I didn't really think about it, was I started to build my resume as I went along to every different billet that I held, right? So I would have a Word document that would follow me around in my hard drive, because I'd take my hard drive everywhere I go, right, from duty station to duty station. And every time I filled a billet, anytime I maybe they asked me to do something, hey, take charge of this Navy Marine Corps Relief Society thing, and just raising donations for this relief society. And I was a coordinator for that, so I was like, hey, look, this isn't actually my billet when I took over in my SOP, but it's something outside of that I'm actually doing. So bam, 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 put it in writing there, so I won't forget it.
Absolutely.
Because as time goes on, I don't have the best memory. I can't go back 2 years and then think about, hey, what the heck did I do back then? So it's good to keep like a running log of everything that you've done. The thing's like 10, 15 pages long. I'm not going to include that in any kind of resume, but it's good to kind of take those pieces out of there to tailor your resume. Oh, yeah, I did this.
Absolutely.
Let me stick that in there. So just a little tip for anybody out there listening. Keep a running log of all your stuff over the years.
That's great.
Yeah, and I would even add on to that just a little bit. If you have the opportunity, and we all have, 168 hours a week, so we're all afforded the same amount of time. But if you can sit down and take the time once a month, once a quarter, once every 6 months. I actually started 6 years into my military career. I transitioned off active duty into the reserves for a few years. And when I did that transition, I did the ACAP process, which was the old TAP process.
Yeah.
And we did resume was like at the forefront of that process. There wasn't really much else to it. But from that point, I created my resume. And then from then, every three months or 6 months, I would sit down and just redo my resume and add things to it. Because I found as I was going through my career in the civilian and then jumping back onto active duty, even being in the IT field, like I would get certifications, I would get training, I would do things that I could then add to my resume. And I just kind of kept adding that stuff over time to my resume and just built this running tally of things that I did and tweaking it along the way as well, rereading it every time I did that. So if you can take the time once a month, once a quarter, every 6 months, even once a year at the most, and just sit down and just reread your resume from front to back, you'll be amazed how many typos you find, how many incomplete sentences you find, let alone things that you've done that are actually missing from your resume that you might not have thought about, or maybe you got them after you wrote the resume. It's definitely good to revisit it.
Yeah.
And you have to
John,
invest in
if
yourself.
I could.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. If I could just caveat off that. And there we go, caveat, bringing back the Marine Corps lingo, right?
Yes, sir.
What works for me, how you mentioned do it every quarter, right? But sometimes life gets in the way. Sometimes, we kind of forget about things. So implant that into your life. Schedule that, put a calendar schedule, schedule that, maybe an hour of that every week or every quarter, and put it in the calendar so it pops up. It's in your face, like, oh man, I gotta do this, and don't ignore it. I don't know if about you gentlemen, but I work strictly off my calendar. My calendar is full of everything I need to do. If it's not on my calendar,
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. If my wife, if she tells me, hey, it's your dinner night tonight, hey, I don't know anything about it. It's not on my calendar. You didn't put it on it, and then that's when I go out and buy a pizza or something. But it needs to be on the calendar. That's just how I function over the last 20 years in the military, and that's how I know how to function. So definitely, if that works for you, schedule those things out, like, hey, an hour of resume building, an hour of networking, study time, or whatever it is, an hour on LinkedIn, just looking,
Yeah.
browsing, etc. Schedule that into your time. It worked for me. I don't know. It may work for somebody else out there.
Yeah, I think you have to invest in yourself. You have to do that because you have to keep in mind you only get one time to transition. Like
Yeah.
you only one time to transition. If you take it for granted, you're gonna have a horrible transition. It is gonna be miserable. So you have to hit those roadblocks. You have to hit those timelines to ensure that the day you take the uniform off, like you're prepared. Because guess what? The mission is going to continue without you. So
That's right.
you gotta do the steps you need to make that successful transition.
Absolutely.
And I just want to ask one more thing about the interview process. This last kind of bullet that we're talking about. After you've done, say, your first interview or your first two interviews, what happens after that? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, if you are in the process of interviewing for a job, or if you've already completed one interview for a job, does that stop everything else that you're doing, or do you do them like sort of in tandem, in parallel with each other? Because there's a point where you have to make a decision to take the job offer or not take the job offer, or if they even call you back. But do you continue to put in your resume and do things like that? Like, what do you recommend to people?
Absolutely. Yeah, I say continue to strike while while you have the opportunity, until you get that offer letter, nothing's set in stone. Again, I think a piece I missed is once you are preparing for that interview, you want to make sure you also dress for the interview, right? Even down to your belt, your shoes. You want to make sure, and there are guidelines on how you should dress for an interview. But once you get to that point where you are applying for positions and you are getting interviews, I say continue to, stay hot and heavy until the day that you get that offer letter. It's better to have a few jobs that you can decide, hey, look, this job is paying me this, but I like this about this particular position. That's a great problem to have, versus waiting, being told no or not right now, and now you're starting that process. That's kind of disheartening to kind of, to do that. So I say continue to charge hard, put as many resumes in as you can, just keep track of what you're applying for. And also I would say stay in the same industry. Like don't apply for a position as a HR personnel today and then someone working janitorial services tomorrow, because then you're going to confuse yourself. So at least give yourself, a month, maybe 2 months to stay in that same particular job industry until you find what you want. And if you decide to move on later, then stay in that for another 30 to 60 days. So.
Yeah. So I did a little bit backwards maybe for myself. I did it. So I in my career in the military, I was a legal admin officer, right? So I worked in legal. I did military justice stuff, and in my latest endeavor now, in my latest career now, so I did a complete shift. Now I'm working with the Navy and in surface warfare, right? So something which I'm not very knowledgeable on, but during the interview, I was like, look, I'm 100% willing to learn this. I bring these skills to the table, which I think are great and a great addition. But I'm also what I am not as knowledgeable on. You can trust that I will 100% be engaged in learning the processes, and I'll pick it up quick. And it's been a matter of OJT since I've been there, and I've been there since October. And I think it's going great. I mean, the Navy does have a ton of acronyms, things I don't know about, but I'm invested, and I think that kind of gives the boss, one of the folks that were on the hiring panel, the warm and fuzzy, like, okay, this guy gives a crap about what he's doing, he's willing to put the time in to invest to actually learn this stuff. We made a good choice. At least I hope that they're thinking that, right?
Yeah.
But I am making an effort to do all that stuff, but yeah, I was open to a career change because I just didn't want to do what I in my MOS anymore. I just wanted a complete different trajectory in what I was doing. This kind of opened that up to show me like, hey, look, I don't need to just be in this lane. I am open to this as well, and I can acquire these skills from this new career to apply it to something and use it as a building block if I decide to move on again. So at least that's my perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I also wanted to touch on something that we skimmed over it while we were talking about their resumes. And I know for sure it's a different section of Hire Heroes USA that handles the USA jobs, the federal resumes. But can we just touch on like the differences between a normal resume and a federal resume? What are some of the key things? And then also like how that process works with Hire Heroes USA.
Got it. So essentially, a federal resume and just a standard professional resume are the same. All right. There are some things that a federal resume require that a standard professional resume don't, and that would be, your employer's name, the address, full address, the amount of hours you work, the salary, your supervisor's information, name as well as phone number, and if it's okay for you, the employer, the soon-to-be employer, to contact, your past employer. Other than that, essentially everything else is the same. Whereas though a standard professional resume, we don't want it to be no more industry standards, say no more than 2 pages. As though with a federal resume, it can be as long as, your job require, your job skill, requires. So, that is basically the difference in between a standard professional resume as well as a federal. Now, with our federal team, we do not write federal resumes, but what we will do is take your federal resume and revise it and give you the key points you need to kind of focus on or concentrate on to kind of get it to the job description standard.
And as far as because I guess maybe one thing that we also kind of glazed over a little bit, we definitely talked about it, but the fact that each resume should be tailored for each specific job that you're applying for. So if you're applying for 20 jobs, theoretically you should have 20 generally the same, but slightly different resumes, because that summary at the top is going to be a little bit different based on the job you're applying for if it's not exactly the same job.
Absolutely.
When it comes to that, and also for federal resumes as well, especially for federal resumes as well, do you recommend to get that resume reviewed by Hire Heroes if they're working with Hire Heroes USA to get their resumes done in the first place? Do you recommend revisiting that resume every time they put a resume together for another job?
Yes. So with a federal resume, normally those positions are open anywhere from 90 to 180 days. You have to be, kind of leery of those that close within 2 to 3 weeks because, chances of getting those are really slim to none. So what we will ask you to do is I would send you out a professional resume writing template. You will follow that template to the T. You will send that back to us with a copy of the actual job description. Our federal team will look at the job description as well as your federal resume, and they're going to revise it for you, saying, hey, look, I would expound on this. I would take this out. I'll focus on this a little bit more. And then they will send that back to you, and it will be color-coded, like what you need to do to kind of fix that. I would always say, once you get that back, make those corrections, send it back to us, and let's revise it to ensure that everything meets what that federal resume team has put out for you to do, so you can apply for that position, in enough time to be successful, at least getting to the next part of that hiring process.
Now,
I think that
Romain,
answers your question, right? Maybe.
Real quick. So I understand, as I'm currently building my federal resume right now, and I've seen a few different templates of it. When I just Googled federal resume template, right? And I started building it, and I know that there's certain things that you need to include on your federal resume, or at least nice to have. Something like maybe include, like you mentioned, your your previous supervisors, their contact information.
Got it.
Salary, I think, is one of the things that needs to go on a federal resume as well, or at least
Mhm.
it's a nice to have on there, right? So they know exactly where to position you. What about like civilian resumes? I mean, do we need to put like our salary on there? Is that a requirement? Is it a nice to have? Should we even do it?
I would say stay away from it, because what you don't want to do is put yourself in a position where you're underselling yourself. You know,
Yeah.
if you put in that position in the civilian market pays 10 to 20 grand more, and you've listed on your resume that you were making a lot less, then that gives them,
Mhm.
hey, you were working for this amount, then I'm going to sell you a little bit less than that. So, and plus too, you in an interview you want to be clear cut and concise and to the point, and end it as soon as possible. You don't want to give any extra time to ask more questions. So
Right.
if they ask you what you were making, if you feel comfortable with telling them, cool. If not, I would just stay away from that. I would always focus on what are you guys offering. So
Yeah. And then I'll also and I'm looking for some feedback on you for as well on this. During one of my interviews, they asked me what are my salary expectations, and I thought back to like different interviewing tips that I've heard in the past, and I didn't give them a number. I just said, look, based on what I bring to the table, I'm open to seeing what the company is willing to offer. Please send me all that stuff in an email, and I'll be prompt to response. Something to that effect. I
got it.
didn't want to corner myself and say, hey, look, I want whatever 90,000. And in
Mhm.
reality, they were like, man, and going back offline, they're like, oh man, we would have paid this guy 120,
Yeah.
but he just said
Yeah.
90. So I've watched videos on interviewing tips and all that stuff. Not to paint myself in a corner per se, right? With including all that information at an interview, because you don't know what they're thinking. They might put something on the job description that says they will pay between 100 and 120,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
But in reality, I mean, if you're bringing more to the table, like, hey, I have multiple experience in this niche area, maybe I can ask for a little bit more. So I'm just looking for some insight on you. Is that something that you've heard or have experience in, like not
Absolutely.
coming forward with an amount right off the bat and then just expecting them to send you an offer and just negotiating at that point?
Well, also I've heard or been in positions where they're still going to, if you respond with that, they will still come back and say, no, we need a number. So what do you do in that
Mm-hmm.
point? So I say
Yeah.
use tools like, I know LinkedIn has a salary
Like
guide
an
on
estimator?
it, as well as as well as
Yeah.
Glassdoor.
Yeah.
I would say, it's depending on your experience level. If you're senior, I would ask for the max, and
Yeah.
then let them work their way down.
Right.
If they if they're interested in you, they're interested in you. So if you're asking me about salary, chances are I bring value to your organization. So
Yeah.
at that point, I would sell myself and, hey, look, based on my experience and what I've done in my military time in the military, as well as what I'm doing now, I feel that a fair and equitable salary would be $150,000. And then you let them
Mm-hmm.
work their way down. Well, we can give you 125. I'll take 127 with additional PTO days.
Yeah.
So if you can't get the salary that you want, you can always negotiate something other than salary. Extra PTO,
Absolutely.
a bonus, something else to kind of cover that gap in what you're looking for.
Right. Yeah.
So
I've noticed a lot of service members who are getting out are they're really shortchanging themselves when it
yeah,
comes to that,
yeah,
because they jump right at it, right? Like, oh, look, I was making whatever 40,000 a year as a sergeant or whatever the sergeant makes, right? And oh
yeah,
man, I got a job. I have this experience in this one area that not a lot of people have, like aircraft mechanic or something, And man, I'm getting an offer for 80,000. Oh, dude, you could have got a lot more, you
yeah,
know. So yeah, I think a lot of folks tend to paint themselves in a corner when it comes to that, jumping at the first thing and not realizing, hey, look, they could have negotiated a little bit better by being a little bit more
absolutely.
vague or doing some research on the front end of what somebody in that position would make. Right. So no, great,
Absolutely.
great insight, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I see a lot of us veterans, we only ask for what we were making on active duty. Hey, I was making 50
Yeah.
grand on
Yeah.
active duty. give me what I was making. He's like, come on, man, you need so much more now. So yeah,
Yeah.
50 grand is like always that number. I want 50 grand.
Yeah.
So
And once you get out and look at your expenses and realize that you now need to pay for your own health benefits and
yeah,
dental and all that, 50 grand is not going to go that far. You need to
absolutely,
take that 50 grand, take your BAH that you were making, your clothing allowance, mesh that all together, and maybe that will give you a more accurate number. Think about the
absolutely,
benefits.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's good. Good insight, man.
Cool. Well, I've got a lot out of this. I think if I can speak for the panel, I think we've all got a little bit out of this and walked away with something,
Oh, yeah.
some benefits. I do want to thank you, Romain, for being with us. We are going to have you on for however long it takes to get as much information as we can out about the things that Hire Heroes USA is providing to service members, whether they're still on active duty, whether they've retired, even to spouses, as we mentioned, and just trying to dig into some of those things and also provide value back to the community and to Hire Heroes USA as well.
Okay.
That's what we're here for. But I did want to ask you one final kind of wrap up before we leave. Where can people find you online, and where would you point them to get access to Hire Heroes USA?
Absolutely. You can just go to our website at www.hireheroesusa.org. And I laugh because, most people don't use www now. They just say hireheroesusa.org. Or you could just go to Google search and just type in Hire Heroes USA. And it comes right up. Also take a look at our job board to see that we partner with there's probably over 15,000 jobs on that job board alone. And there's also companies that we partner with that also offer positions that someone may be interested in working as well. So
great.
One final question real quick before we get you off here.
Yeah.
Now, usage of Hire Heroes USA, at least a time frame. Do you need to be active duty to use Hire Heroes USA, or do you need to be in the service? If not, how long after you leave the service are you able to utilize Hire Heroes USA, the assistance from Hire Heroes USA?
got it. I will tell you this: there's no time limit. There's no time frame. I have a client that I'm working with that's 81 years old. That I wrote his resume maybe about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. As long as you've served 1 day in the military, you're eligible to use our services, and there's no cap. So that's a really big time frame. So if you serve 1 day in, if you've been out for 50 years, you're still eligible for services with Hire Heroes USA, and it's also a lifelong service. So if you've used us and want to come back to us 10 or 15 years from now, you're welcome with open arms. So
awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. That's why we reached out and why we wanted to kind of collaborate and partner together and get some of this information out to service members, because it's invaluable, the services you're providing as an org, and not everybody knows about it, and we're trying to get more and more word out there about it to the public. So really thank you again for coming on with us, and look forward to the next episode.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody else out there who's stuck with us this far, thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you for listening in. You can definitely find anything we talked about down in the show notes. We'll leave some links there. If you're listening to us on Reads Across America Radio on Wednesday evenings at 11 p.m., then you may or may not see show notes, but feel free to just email straight out to us, and we'll get back with you and get you whatever information you might need. And be sure to check us out on all the podcast platforms, and be sure to go out there to Hire Heroes USA if you're looking for any information on job hunting, resume writing, or anything else to help you out with your transition from military back to civilian. Check them out. They're a great resource, and we appreciate them being with us.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks,
we'll talk to you all later.
Thanks.
Have a good one.